Welcome back to the Innovative Agency, everyone. So good to be with you here again today. It's Sharon Toerek, and we have had a number of conversations on the show over the last probably 6 to 9 months on AI and what it means for all of you owning and operating agencies, both from an operational perspective, from a business development perspective, financial perspective, and today, I'm really looking forward to a conversation with our guest about what is it really like to integrate AI into your creator process, into your production process, and where are the opportunities? What are the same things you need to be thinking about preparing for? And let's have the conversation not from a fear based position, but from one of, I think, opportunity. And I think today's guest is really going to help us with that. And so, Hikari Senju, thank you so much for joining us. Hikari is founder of Omneky and is quite the AI wizard. I've looked at a little bit of what his company is doing using AI, generative AI, in the creative process, and I think you're all going to be impressed with some of the opportunities you might not be thinking about for your agencies and what it might mean for your margins, what it might mean for your capacity. So first of all, um, thank you, Hikari, for joining us. I'm looking forward to talking to you.
Thanks for having me, Sharon. Really excited to be here.
Yeah, so let's maybe set the table a little bit. So Omniki helps with, I'm going to let you explain it, but my layperson's explanation of it by looking at your site and looking at all the other information that I read to prepare for today is that it basically takes creative and puts it on steroids to create multiple iterations and impressions efficiently based on underlying creative for brands. And so that's sort of my layperson's view of it. But why don't you sort of talk about particularly how Omniki helps and works with agencies? And we'll start there. And then I've got so many questions to ask you about what you're seeing out there in the market in terms of generative AI and agencies and what it means for them.
Awesome. So OmniKey generates and optimizes ad campaigns, and in particular, we focus on data-driven, smart advertising, creative and smart advertising campaigns. So we integrate with all your different ad networks. We get insights from what types of creative is working, and then we autonomously generate this content that is brand safe. So we have a model that's trained on your brand or the brands of your clients, and in a very secure segmented way, so it's not mixing with anybody else's data, uh, to help you scale your advertising campaigns and drive higher return on ad spend ultimately for your customers.
So, if I am the creative director of an independent agency and I heard what you just said, I might be a little bit fearful about what that meant for the demand for my team and the inspiration that we bring to our clients and brands and how it's going to sort of affect the balance between human inspiration and content creation and AI enabled content iteration. So I'm sure I'm not the first person to talk about this with you because you've been in AI for a long time. And you have an advertising background. So what how would you counsel an agency leader on how to be thinking about this from a position of opportunity?
Well, first of all, my dad's a painter, and so I have incredible. I come from this from a perspective of a creator and of a creative, and have um, and so we say, and it's on our website, we're not here to automate creativity, we're here to scale creativity, to superpower creativity. The job of the human is still the big idea, it's the inspiration, it's the new ways of telling a story or thinking about positioning a product. But the idea is that the AI is here to help augment and scale your business as well as an agency, so you can service more clients and not do as much of the drudgery work in terms of the day-to-day optimization of those ad campaigns or the running of these A/B tests or creating different variations of the creative. You have to create horizontal and vertical and different seconds of videos, and then test different copy or test different product SKUs, and there's all that work that's required in terms of driving higher return on ad spend that's kind of separate from like human ingenuity and creativity. And so we very much believe that there's still a place, and a very important place, and ultimately I think what differentiates a successful agency or successful marketing campaign is going to be that human ingenuity. But we're here to automate the all the other stuff, and a lot of the drudgery, so that you can spend more time actually doing um, you know, work that gives you more alpha essentially, versus doing something that the AI can potentially wasting time doing things drudgery that the AI could do much more cheaply and faster and more effectively.
Right. That makes sense to me. I'm wondering, as you've been building your business, I'm sure you've been talking to lots of marketers in different environments, but as you talk to agency people, what are some of what are some of the misnomers, or maybe the I don't want to say unfounded, but what are some of the big worries they express to you? And how do you address them sort of when they do express them to you? Because it's as I was saying to you before we hit record today, I feel like the conversation has shifted and adjusted and leveled a little bit around AI and the agency business model over the last, 18 months or so. It feels more calm, it feels more rational now than it maybe did 2 years ago. But agencies are obviously still concerned about it and about how it's going to impact the demand for their services, how it might impact their revenue models, their profitability, all of it. And so what are you hearing from agency owners and leaders, and how do you address it when you do?
Yeah, so I think there's several buckets concerns. One is, I think, related, and sure that we actually had a very interesting conversation right before this about IP and copyright and like IP protection, and like can I even use some of these models because it's probably trained on data that it wasn't copyrighted properly, or trained on data that's properly copyrighted. Oftentimes, a lot of these underlying models, especially if it's open sourced or based on open sourced models, there's significant limited liability. If you read like the terms and conditions of some of these models, like they take almost no liability in terms of you
Nope.
using these
No.
models. And so like you're using these models at your own risk. And if you use, train your customers' data on this, or use them for your customers' um, campaigns, you're actually putting yourself, your agency, and your customer at risk,
Right.
violating a lot of these things. And so I think there's that bucket of like IP and liability, and like,
Mhm.
can I even use some of these models? And then which models can I use? Which models can't I use? And
Right.
that's not always very clear. And it's really oftentimes in you know, the fine line of the terms and conditions for each company. And oftentimes also a lot of these self-service tools, these cheap tools that many people are playing around with, exploring, that maybe your designer found and recommending. If you read
Right.
the terms and conditions of those tools, they oftentimes take no liability. I mean,
Right.
even like the leading, actually, some of the biggest design tools that household names. If you read their terms and conditions, the default is they don't take any liability. If you want them to take liability, you need to go and have an enterprise conversation with that company. And so, um, there's that concern, I think, related to can I even use these models, and which models are safe to use and which models aren't safe.
Right.
Um, and then I think the second concern is, yeah, like in more longer term is what is the future of my industry if the AI is automating content creation and campaign management, um and I think I think it comes back to um you know this understanding some of the strengths and weaknesses, or like some of the strengths of the agency, which is your relationships, your customer relationships, uh
Mhm.
the value of distribution, I think, actually is more important than ever. And so if you can uh, have very sophisticated kind of distribution strategies regarding television channels, mobile channels, gaming channels, that actually I think will have more value, because in fact, in a world where there's more competition, because there's more competition for attention, because there's more content, because anybody can now generate content really easily, there's more value that accrues onto the distribution side. So I would say that things related to distribution and orchestrating distribution, which is what we do with our omni-channel platform, I think would have more value. And then when it comes to content creation, it's, yeah, I mean, it's the trend is it's becoming more and more easier to create content, but to create smart content, to create effective content, to create content that breaks the noise, that's harder than ever. And that actually is again an area, an edge that you know a human, an agency, uh, where you're the partner of that brand, ideating these concepts and strategies with your brand customers. You can
Mhm.
also provide alpha for those campaigns, which is okay. Well, now imagine a world where everyone has access to these tools. Well, then now how do I work on behalf of my customer, my client, to have them break through that noise, especially where the competitive landscape has changed. Now it's harder than ever, you know, to um, to kind of win mind share. And so how do you tell the right story? How do you create right smart content? How do you resonate with customers on an individual basis, on a personalized way, in a more sophisticated, more intelligent way? That becomes more challenging. And so I think those are areas that there will be more value for agencies and more opportunities for agencies. But yeah, the standard, like, hey, we're just gonna create some meta campaign, I know, run on, auto, be like an autopilot, and I just produce like too creative and it's gonna drive some results. That Those days are probably over. And I think we need to now level up and think about, well, what is the new competitive landscape and what are the new opportunities uh,
Yeah.
and challenges that this technology enables.
Yeah. Well, and I agree with you. Agencies are in a great spot to know how and where to level up and how to coach and counsel their clients when and how to level up. And this is great stuff. And so I want to just pick at a couple of threads of what you said. So let's turn back for a minute to the sort of practical concerns about what kind of risk are we taking on as an agency by using some of these tools. And um, there are some tools that have multiple versions, multiple iterations. And so do you have any having, coming at this from being the owner of a tech platform in this space, any cheat sheet or any sort of pointers for the agency folks listening to this about how to know whether or not you're using a version of a tool that's going to provide a higher level of security, brand integrity. Are there any tells? I mean, everybody knows they should be reading the terms and conditions. So thank you for mentioning that. You made my lawyer heart swell up a couple sizes when you did
Yeah.
that. But are there any sort of rules of the road for making a quick assessment about which versions of the tools um, protect at a higher level than others?
Well, I mean, I think that, yeah, there's several degrees here. So first is, yeah, just put your terms and conditions of the tool you use into ChatGPT or some model, and then just maybe just ask them that question. And that probably is the most straightforward process, which is,
Yeah,
does this term and condition protect me from or does it provide liability protection
yeah.
for infringement of copyright? Um, and I think you can get, that should, and oftentimes I would say that almost all the default, actually, I would say, is that
Is no, of
is no, it
course.
doesn't. Because as a company, why would I take liability protection if the competitive environment is that no one's taking liability protection? And if my competitor isn't taking liability protection, then it's
Right.
a disadvantage by saying I'm going to take liability protection unless I have to. In the
Here's why I'm asking, because there's some purveyors of tools out there
Yeah.
that in their marketing to agencies or to any user actually are claiming a higher level of security, integrity, protectiveness around the data that's being input. And there's terminology that's developed around this, closed system versus not, or premium subscription levels versus not. So are there any like quick tells based upon how a platform owner is talking about their product that can, steer you in the right direction about, I mean, yeah, that's a great, obviously you can plug the terms into Chat GPT and ask them, but um, how do you assess when one vendor's got multiple versions of its tool available and they're making these claims about, well, this one's going to give you a higher level of security or
Yeah.
protection?
I mean, I think the most best type of security is basically that the platform takes all liability off your plate. And so if there's ever an issue with the content that's being generated, that platform takes all liability. And like, and it's uncapped, right? So it's not like capped at like some 2x of the monthly subscription or annual subscription,
Right, right, exactly.
which is like you're paying
Here's
whatever.
your here's your 74.95.
Exactly. Yeah. Whoops. We broke up, but like we broke some copyright law, but you'll get back your $100, and you have to pay the $5 billion in legal fees, and so like that,
Yeah,
that's so like the safest is some kind of uncapped liability by the platform, right?
yeah.
And oftentimes I think for some of the biggest enterprise deals and the biggest enterprise with the biggest enterprise models, I think they do off, actually the company, because the AI company, because they're so geared towards growth, sometimes they do cut those kind of deals
Mm,
with those brands, just for the sake of growing their base, the revenue base, and closing a big logo. And so I think if you're a big brand, especially if you're a big brand, or if you represent a big brand, you have a lot of or you're an agency that represents many big brands, you have a lot of leverage to say, hey, like, you know, like uncapped liability for any issues related to IP infringement.
hmm.
Um, Now that said, I think it's very difficult for any AI company to actually guarantee IP liability protection,
Right.
because everyone's training on these, you know,
Yeah.
like web, like it basically like the if you aren't training on copyrighted material in some ways, your model is so much worse because
Yeah.
I think and there's like these headlines, right, which is like OpenAI says they will pay publishers, or they'll say they're not going to violate liabilities. But then, well, what about the every other model? That because there are dozens of alternatives to OpenAI that are not even saying these things. So they're definitely not paying. In fact, you don't even hear them. You don't hear about them paying publishers because they're not. There's all these, and in fact, now increasingly, a lot of the state art models are not even American, and they're definitely not, protected
Right.
their IP. So, uh,
Right. Right. Right.
and oftentimes, therefore, the best tools that generate the best quality content therefore switch to these other models, because these other models produce better output. And I think most product designers and people who build this technology, they care about the quality of the product, they care about the quality of the outputs, they're caring. I think legal concerns oftentimes um, are secondary to the quality of the product. And so um, especially kind of in the fast and loose world of, move fast and break things tech world, I think people mostly gear towards growth and product quality than towards, protecting one's base when it comes to legal. And so,
Yeah.
and the idea is that, you grow fast enough, and then eventually, if you grow fast enough, you can hire the lawyers to protect yourself once you've made it. Kind of that's kind of in some ways the
Well,
Silicon
it's
Valley.
arbitrage, right? I mean, I've been
Yeah.
saying this and writing this for probably at least a year. It's arbitrage. Big AI, this is just my personal viewpoint. I'm not suggesting it's yours, but big AI is taking a calculated risk that it is less expensive for them to train their models on as many works as they can get their hands on, copyright protected or otherwise. And they will deal with the copyright and IP consequences later
Yes.
in the form, most likely, of, in my view, licensing deals that they will be forced to make. And it'll start with big creative owners, right? Like the Disneys of the world. They will make those license arrangements and pay for them only when they have to, and only after they've already done the training. I mean, I think this is very intentional on their part.
Yeah, I mean, I think this is the high growth playbook, right? This is
Yeah,
how Airbnb grew very quickly. This is how Uber grew very quickly. You kind of flout the laws initially, and then you grow big enough so that you can resolve the issues later once you've made it. And so
right.
this is the standard kind of Silicon Valley playbook in some ways. And so it's no surprise that it's being applied again here. I think the issue and the concern is that this is not this is such a dynamic space, and the winners haven't been determined. So yes, it's like, yes, you could figure out the laws once you've made it, but has OpenAI actually made it? Like, it's not very clear. um and so yes, OpenAI can now say, hey, we're going to take liability, or hey, we're going to pay the creators, or the content creators, But now next week you have a whole new company that shows up out of nowhere that's now growing faster than OpenAI because of some new development in these underlying model architectures or advancements in these chips. And then now suddenly OpenAI is at a disadvantage because they're weighed down by all these liabilities that they've taken on. And now they're competing against a new competitor that doesn't have these kinds of liabilities and that kind of baggage. And so I think that's where there is some so like it's because the space is moving so quickly. That's I think that's one of the concerns if I'm a big company like OpenAI, what I'm thinking.
Right, right, right. So, all right, so now that we've scared everybody, and talked about the risk, I like to talk about this in the context of balancing the risk with the opportunity, because there's obviously a ton of opportunity for agencies who figure out how to integrate these tools into their offerings, or who help their clients, the brands, understand why using them is good and helpful. And so, what are some of the low-hanging fruit things that agencies who are fearful around this and the legal landscape of it, and what are some of the things that the first steps that they can and should be taking, either internally or to have the conversations with their clients around adopting these tools and, you know, communicating about them in a way that gives them the right context in terms of the good aspects of integrating them into their work.
Yeah. And so this comes back to like the experience of being, son of an artist and going back this concept of like, well, what creates novel artwork? And this is, nothing new as well. There's that great quote, which is like, great good artists copy, great artists steal. And then there's always been, it's time for hundreds of years, there's been lawsuits against artists for stealing somebody's artwork or stealing someone's concept. And the idea here is you have to create something novel on top of the thing that you stole. Really, one way of kind of phrasing this. And so I think when it comes to an agency owner, when it comes to incorporating in AI tools or Gen AI outputs, is you have to do something novel, on top of the AI generated output. The novelty can't just be you using this tool. The
Right.
novelty has to be the AI generates some output and then you've put some human touch on it. And this is why our workflow has a human loop and all the approval is done by a human. And this is a tool for empowering humans and not just completely automating. But you need to figure out how you get the human in the loop to kind of create that higher
Mhm.
that original art, that original work. And so there are a lot of opportunities there. There's opportunities, and this is how our tool works: is that AI generates dozens and hundreds of drafts and thousands of draft ads, and then the human goes in and edits it, approves it, adjusts it. And we have a whole editor tool within our platform where humans can add that human touch. And I think when there's that human touch, then it is more copyrightable. Then it is more IP protected. And obviously, you also need to just make sure that none of the content that you're editing has some, obvious output that is blatantly stolen from somebody else.
Yeah.
So there's that element of like just making sure the output doesn't violate some pre-existing copyright. Like you don't have like Mickey Mouse somewhere in the background. But like, but then on top of that, if you just add some level of human ingenuity or novelty or editing, then I think you can say that is an original piece of artwork, that is an original um, output. And I think, you're probably more safe to use those tools. And I think generally also, um, there's again, this is, we had a conversation right before this about like, input training versus output and the protection of, training versus output. But like, generally it seems to me that, when it comes to output, obviously it's not okay to have to use an output that is generated that's completely, indistinguishable from a pre-existing
Mhm.
piece of art or work. But
Right.
if it is sufficiently unique and differentiated, then that is slightly more protected. And so that focusing on that last mile, that last step of unique output, I think is where they're probably, you could probably be a bit more lean into the technology. And then that probably, because I think agencies have to, they can't just, as an industry, you can't just sit on the sidelines and wait for this thing to completely, you know, uh, blow you away, right? Like you
Yeah.
have to
Yeah.
figure out ways of incorporating Gen AI into your workflow, or else, it will automate a lot of the stuff that agencies do. And so, therefore leaning in to figuring out ways of incorporating this um, technology to scale your creativity, but with continued levels of human ingenuity on top of it, I think is the right strategy of incorporating this technology in a more legally safe way.
Mhm. Well, and I mean, so I mean, to your point, the production and the iteration of the production and the efficiencies of using the AI tool to do that. Um, I've not heard any case of it being able to replace the specific industry knowledge or strategic insights that an actual human, marketer has based on their years of experience. Yes, AI can help you do deep research and it can help you sort of generate ideas, but they have to be wedged in context, right?
Yeah,
And to me, that context is what agencies have always excelled at, right?
absolutely, absolutely. I
Perspective creation and yeah, and
I think
so
that's exactly right. I think it's context. These AI models have limited context windows, while a
yeah,
human has infinite, well, really very much longer context windows than an AI model does.
yeah,
And so the advantage precisely is the advantage that the human has, at least today. And again, these context windows are ever increasing. So one cannot say this is going to be true a year or two from now, but at least today, a human has a humongous advantage over an AI model because it can incorporate way more context into the creative process and the creation than specific to that particular campaign or that particular client or particular customer base than an AI model can.
awesome. Well, this has been a fascinating conversation about sort of how to get ready to adopt these tools at scale, how to be thinking about risk management, and how to be clear about, I think, the opportunities you have to distinguish the human element that your agency, uses to sort of set the stage or the strategy for how to implement the campaigns that you create and the suggestions you make to your clients. So I want to make sure we give everybody an opportunity to find out where they can go to learn more about what Omneky does to help agencies with all of this, and so they can find out more about the tool itself.
Awesome. So you can visit us at omneky.com, omneky.com. You can email me at Hikari, Hikari at omneky.com or hi at omneky.com. And we have a free trial. So you can, it's 7 day free trial. And so you can uh, try create an account, start generating content, start getting insights from your campaigns. We also have predictive scorings before you launch the ads. You can get, some kind of predictive score of how that we think that will perform and all for free for the first 7 days, and then hopefully I think the value will prove itself through that process. And then definitely, if you want to then onboard additional brands or use buy additional credits or bulk buy credits or bring
Yeah,
on board additional team members, that is really
great.
where I'd love to chat and see if there's an opportunity to kind of scale this tool with your agency. But yeah, I mean, you can get started for no cost at all other than your time, and
Wonderful.
I think that the technology will prove itself.
Well, and I think that Hikari also has got a wealth of knowledge about what he's seeing out there, in terms of deployment of these platforms and how it's really impacting the businesses of agencies day to day. So by all means, check it out. And Hikari, thank you so much for sharing time with me today and for um, sharing your perspective on this from the point of view of an actual tech purveyor of one of these platforms. It's been a really great conversation. So thanks so much for your time today. And thanks everybody for joining us today. I hope you found the conversation as valuable as I did, and we will see you on the next episode. So stay well until then.